Rebecca Oshona as our sign language interpreter. That small but significant step is one of the government's efforts to address the problem of extreme income inequality. A year later, from the first
Thanks for inviting.
Under a time frame that many say is too short. This is but one of the very few questions we aim to get to the bottom of in this discussion this evening on Talk of the Nation. For this conversation, I am joined by Advocate Vicky Yatoivo, who is the Special Advisor to the Minister of Labour and Industrial Relations and the Employment Creation Ministry. Good evening, ma'am, and welcome to Talk of the Nation.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here tonight.
Secondly, we are joined by Mrs. Penny Munkawa, who is the Director of Labour Services, also in the Ministry of Labour, Industrial Relations and Employment Creation. Good evening, ma'am. Welcome to Talk with the Nation.
Good evening. Good evening, viewers.
And then thirdly, we are joined by Mr. Tim Parkhouse, who is the Secretary General of the Namibian Employers Federation. Good evening, sir. Welcome to Talk with the Nation.
Good evening. Thanks for inviting us.
It's much nicer when you have such a short name for the institution that you represent, unlike the ministry. And then finally, we have another long name, Mrs. Nelly Kahua, the Secretary General of the Namibian Domestic and Allied Workers Union. Good evening and welcome to Talk with the Nation.
Good evening, viewer. Thank you very much.
I'd like to start by asking you, Advocate Yatoivo, the very first question. If we can just place a value on domestic work for Namibian employers, for families and the nation as a whole.
Well, I think that domestic work has enormous value and not value that's adequately recognized. When you think of it, many of us would not be able to go out to work every day if we did not have support at home. It's not just that. It's improving the quality of the life of our families. It's providing care that we may not be able to give. The only problem is that a long time ago, when someone started calculating things like GDP, they decided that this is not productive work. I think it's productive, and I think there are modern trends now to actually try to value it and recognize it as part of an economy.
From your perspective?
Yes, I do agree with the advocate. Really, where would we be without them?
Yes.
So if we call ourselves working people, we are working people because somebody else is working where we are coming from. So it's the work that we cannot fulfill ourselves to be able to fulfill our work. So it's a domestic worker who is doing it. So if you look at our families, we cannot send our babies right away to the creche. So we leave them in the hands of the domestic worker. We cannot prepare our meals on time if we have to prepare after we come back from work. So it's a domestic worker. And it's really the domestic worker that keep our home together.
Yeah.
Yeah, they give love to our kids in our absence.
And that's something that I guess you cannot calculate.
You cannot put money on it, really.
Monetary value on it.
Yeah.
Mr. Parkhouse, from your
perspective? I can only echo and support what the two ladies have said. It's very nice to come home and the house is clean. In our case, we don't have, the lady doesn't do any cooking, but at least the house is clean, the laundry is done, the ironing's done. We could do it ourselves. But it's very nice to have somebody doing it for you. And I agree with Advocate Yatoivo. Over the years, domestic workers haven't been truly and properly valued.
I'd like to hear specifically from the union, because that's obviously the constituency you look after. Mrs. Kahua, maybe you can speak to that position and that point. Why do you think we undervalue people who fulfill such an important and critical role in our homes?
Thank you very much. I do really appreciate what Dr. Yatoivo present here, and our previous colleagues, Mr. Tim Park and Penny. So we are really, I think, the way forward. We are in the same footstep. As I'm talking in perspective, me myself being a domestic worker for 17 years in Windhoek. So we've been there taking care of other people's kids while you're leaving your kids at home. At least making sure Mr. Tim Park is sitting next to me. The trouser is well ironed, the shirt is well ironed. Our director, our minister, I think they are the most important people in most of our life, really.
Then I'd like to find out from you, Mrs. Yatoivo. So a year ago we sat here in the